Good morning, hockey fans. And my gardener is outside right now. Hey, buddy. Oh, boy. Good morning, hockey fans. This is Stephen Heisler with HeisHockey.com, Victoria's Hockey Company, and Facebook's Junior Hockey Discussion Group. Today is Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. We have Eric back. Eric Ballard is out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He's the director at the Jackson Hole Youth Hockey Association. I get that right, Eric?
Yep.
There you go. We're getting old here. I can remember things once in a while.
Mm-hmm. That's good, buddy.
Man, this gardener is outside my window, and he is blowing the grass and the leaves everywhere, and he does not realize that we are on the air. So, welcome to sunny Florida, 65 degrees, and we still have leaf problems where Eric has snowblower problems, probably. You got a snowblower, Eric?
Yeah, it's a little. It's been a beautiful holiday break, though. Weather's been nice. It's not been below zero, so a little bit of snow, and like I said, it's get used to it. From northern Minnesota.
Why don't you go out and ask him real quick if we can just not do that for 10, 15 minutes? He's right outside my door. Oh, my goodness. It's been a good week so far. The World Junior games yesterday, 5 games were played, 1 relegation game, 4 quarterfinals, and it kind of went exactly as planned. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, some of the games, the Sweden-Finland game was, right down to the wire. We both picked Sweden yesterday, and Sweden decided to pull it off in epic fashion, getting the game winner shorthanded and a little over a minute left. So that one I was, watching. I thought, well, we're going to probably lose that bet together, but Sweden pulled it out.
Let's go through the relegation game first. Latvia and Austria. Going to mess this up. Emilis Vekalatin scored twice, and Bogus Hadas had a goal and 2 assists as Latvia defeated Austria 5-2. Latvia moves a step closer towards remaining among the top-level World Junior teams. Austria, from day one of this event, looked out of place. Their second game, they were down 20-0, goals for and against. They did look better in the third and fourth game somewhat. This matchup with Latvia is clearly a better team. I expect Latvia to take the series. But you have to give Austria credit. They are a developing hockey country, and I like where they're going, and they showed a lot of perseverance.
Yeah, I think, obviously they're playing with the biggest programs in the world, right? And they're not a bad team. I really believe that they would have been better served probably not being in that division, but they stood in there. But, again, some of these teams, even Germany, who I think is extremely good, they've had a couple really, not so good games. But I give Austria credit. They produce a few kids here and there. I believe Thomas Vanek is from Austria, played in the NHL, played in the USHL. I believe so. I might be wrong, but I think Vanek is actually from Austria. So, it was a tough goal for them, but, they finished strong, and hopefully they'll have something to take back to the drawing board and be prepared next time.
They'll play again here in a few days. That's a best-of-3 series they have with Latvia, and we'll see how that goes. I wouldn't be surprised if Austria steals 1 game. It's unlikely, but it would be a pleasant surprise considering how far they come. Really, going into this tournament, it was Switzerland that we thought would be the weak link, and look how strong Switzerland has played in this event.
Yeah, Switzerland's been a big surprise. There's no question. They've got a couple players. That Bieksa kid's extremely talented, and the Muller kid. They're, like you said, I didn't expect Switzerland to be as strong as they were, and they did really well. So it's been a good week. It's been a good couple weeks, that's for sure.
Very good. In the first quarterfinal yesterday, it was Finland and Sweden. Victor Stambach scored shorthanded goal with just 1:05 left in the third period to lift Sweden to a 3-2 comeback win over Finland. The Swedes advance to the semifinals in Halifax, where they will take on the Czechia. That game with Finland and Sweden was eventful. It was close. It was back and forth. I really didn't think ahead of time that Finland had the guns to play with Sweden. I was wrong. Again, that happens occasionally, like every other day, at least 10 times. So it's interesting to see that. I was impressed with Finland's play, that they're coming along as a country for hockey. They're so all in for hockey. I think Finland is probably more into hockey and more like Canada in that respect than a lot of countries around the world.
I think, USA Hockey, I know they get some stuff from Finland on occasion as well in their international programming and through even some of the ADM stuff. But, Finland and Sweden is kind of like a rivalry like US and Canada. They spent a lot of time coaching both Finns and Swedes come over to play over in the US. And, they definitely have a rivalry between them. So between those two countries. So it was good to see. It was good to see the game, and it was good to see that Finland, played as well as they did. And again, it was just a bad bounce over the defenseman's stick and shorthanded. I think it was Carlson that scored, and it was a good game. It was a great game, actually.
Absolutely. Czechia and Switzerland. The Czechia stormed the Swiss into submission in Halifax, conceding the first goal, then scoring 9 unanswered on just 28 shots to win the one side of the fair 9-1. Going into the event, we talked earlier about Switzerland kind of being the team we thought we'd be playing more like Austria. We really didn't give much of a chance. They did better than expected, going to the quarterfinals. Very shocking for that country, but the Czechia just made them look silly yesterday.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'd left the room real quick to grab something, and the Swiss scored right away, and I could hear the roar of the crowd. And my first thought was, man, I should have probably taken the underdog. But the Czechs turned the heat on, and they have too much firepower. And I think the Swiss played so well. I think they're just they ran up against an opponent just a little deeper. And obviously the Czechia, that's a tough team to beat. But I was impressed with the Swiss all tournament.
United States versus Germany. U.S. scored 3 first-period goals and never looked back. Winning the game 11-1, and they will be off to Halifax to face Canada in the next round. They're set to play for a medal for the 5th time in the last 7 World Junior events. The Americans look solid. The Slovakia goalie kind of made them look silly in that one game, but otherwise, all throughout this event, they've been able to put the hammer down and get the job done.
Yeah, like we talked about that one day when the U.S. lost. That was good for them. And if I was to take the team, watching game 1 versus last night, the U.S. they're firing on all cylinders right now. They distributed the puck so well yesterday. Out of the 11 goals, there was a number of players on the score sheet. Some of the, third and fourth line guys were getting tallies. That just proves that the U.S. is extremely deep. But yeah, they looked really good yesterday. They look like a championship team yesterday for sure.
As a coach, when you come off a big win, is it difficult for a team to reset to face a tougher opponent that in the next game? I think sometimes you blow a team out and teams will get overconfident afterwards. How difficult is that going to be for U.S. to overcome that big win to face Canada, who was in a tie game with Slovakia?
I think in a normal season, if you're talking USHL, North American, Major Junior, I think you're right. After a big win like that, it's hard to kind of keep your guys in check. Handling prosperity sometimes is one of the tougher parts of it, the game, and as a coach. But on the world stage and what's at stake right now, I don't think they're going to take anything for granted. That coaching staff for the U.S. team, they're going to have those guys primed and ready to play. I think they're going to be focused, and that's a big game. U.S. versus Canada. We talk about it, centuries of it. It really is U.S. versus Canada. So I don't think that 11-1 win over Germany is going to, be a hindrance to the U.S. team. I think they're going to be ready for Canada.
Canada, Connor Bedard scored at 5:17 of overtime. They give Canada a thrilling 4-3 win and advance to the semifinals over Slovakia. Chippewa Steel netminder Adam Gajan was incredible between the pipes for Slovakia, and it remains unclear what his immediate plans are. For now, it's expected he will return to complete the loan to Green Bay, but we are hearing otherwise. We are hearing that the OHL is opening up the checkbook and is going to do whatever they can to bring this kid in. He's committed to Minnesota Duluth, but I think this tournament kind of overshadowed those plans, and this kid's probably looking at going right to the National Hockey League in a couple of years.
Yeah, when we were doing the morning show there with the North American predictions, and we were talking about Chippewa Steel and how well they were performing, didn't dive into it, but watching Gahan play this World Juniors, I can see why that team has been so successful. He had 40-plus saves last night. I mean, he is extremely gifted. Supposed to be going back to Green Bay, on a loan from Chippewa. I don't know. That's a great question. A lot of those European players, they don't mind the professional route as opposed to the collegiate route. So the World Juniors has obviously shed some light on his trajectory as a goaltender. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't some NHL conversations with some OHL teams, like you said, saying, hey, listen, let's look at a different route for you. So unfortunate if UMD can't corral that, but we get it. But boy, I tell you, he's the reason why Slovakia was as good as they are. He kept those games extremely honest, for sure.
He was kind of a last-minute addition for Slovakia as well. They called him up just a couple of days before the tournament started. He didn't expect to be there at all, but he certainly got in there, stood on his head, and did a fantastic job. So our pick record through 25 games so far, I'm 21-4. Eric is 20-5. One game separates us. Well, probably let's look at the semifinals the day of the event. We won't predict those today. Things can change between now and then, but overall, it's been a very tight competition on the ice and between you and I.
Yeah, no, it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it. We both picked the Americans and the Canadians, and it wouldn't. I mean, those two losses we would have never thought in a million years. But I will bring to light that 2 of my 5 losses were both really close games and overtime and shootouts. So I could be up by 2, but I'm down by 1.
It's okay. It's okay. That Pio Pio, did you Google that place yet? You're going to love that place. So.
No, I haven't. I figured you're going to be the tour guide. It'd be just fine.
I'll be driving for sure, right? So
that's right.
Let's get into the HeisHockey.com article for today. Don't let the lack of discipline blindfold your career. Eric, how many times over our careers have you seen players that with exceptional abilities on the ice, but they're a donkey between the ears? And how does that handicap players over and over again?
Well, I think as long as we've been around, that happens more often than not. And as coaches, it's our job to try to educate those young men and young women to see that all the talent and skill in the world does not give you a free pass. And I would say that in today's game, it's probably a little more prevalent than it was 10 years, 15 years ago. I think that comes down to just a number of things, not to go down the rabbit hole, but I have seen it. I've coached it. You've seen it. It happens all the time. And I think there's a lot of good players that could become great players that have jeopardized their long-term opportunities by not really, being a good steward of the game, being a good ambassador, being a good teammate. It's something that coaches have to consistently work on, for sure.
I think oftentimes coaches lose track of what their role is, and they try to become buddies with the kids on the ice. And a lot of times these coaches aren't much older than the players. We have some tier 2 coaches that are in their early 30s, late 20s, and they're out there on the bench. And on the ice, that isn't a problem, but off the ice, it's kind of hard for a 19-year-old kid to have a lot of not respect. He respects the coach, but doesn't have a lot of concern about the coach's thoughts about the kid's behavior, especially when the coaches are out there trying to be these kids' friends and not really their coach.
Yeah, I think as coaches, sometimes, I mean, I lived it. You want to keep your job. You want to have opportunities. So sometimes you fall victim to being a little closer to the players. Maybe, sometimes condoning, poor behavior and actions because maybe there's some of your better players. Early on in my career, there's no question. I allowed some of that stuff to happen and I shouldn't have. But I think today's coaches, it's even tougher. We talked about it. You and I've talked about it. North American Hockey League, where I coached, you were sometimes had better odds of becoming a mayor of your town or even a governor of your state. When at that time there was only 20, there was 23 or 24 North American Hockey League teams. So you're looking at 23 head coaching positions. And once you obtain those positions, you want to retain those. You want to keep them, and you found ways to do that. But I think sometimes, coaches, they do lose focus. They do lose sight. And this is about, teaching the game, teaching life lessons, and helping these players move on to the very highest levels of hockey. At the same time, giving them some life lessons and life skills that they're going to take away from that, experience in their real life after hockey's done.
I think the coaches that provide a very structured organization, we're going to be here at this time, there at this time. Everything is planned out accordingly, even the practices, what you're doing after the practices, when you're going to be heading to home, when do you have free time for school. That kind of structure is what the expectation is by parents. When other things are delivered and that structure gets thrown out the window, I think that's when kids find the idle time to enjoy themselves, have fun. And I want players to have fun, don't get me wrong. But teams that have a lot of structure and a lot of high expectations perform better on the ice and getting kids on to college than teams without it. And I think that's the key to success. I'll bring up Mark Carlson's name, a USHL coach. He's a structured coach. Even in a camp situation, Mark Carlson wants the bench clean. He doesn't want tape on the floor. He wants the sticks organized. He doesn't care if he's coaching USHL kids or 12 and 13-year-olds. That's his structure. And I love it. He's successful. I got to see an insight of how that man is successful. And the structured part of it is a big part of the equation.
Yeah, I think your foundational pieces, and Mark's done well. He's been in the game a long time. He's stayed at that position for how many years? And I can't steal the quote, but it's a great quote by Frank Serratori, the head coach for the United States Air Forces. Idle time is the devil's workshop. And, Frank told me that last summer when he was out here running one of my hockey schools. And I believe it. You look back and you reflect on the time as a coach. The idle time always seems to have something surface that is not in line with what you're trying to accomplish. So, again, I can't steal that line, but it's a really good one.
Frank Serratori, classic. Coaches and teams need to establish the line of what's acceptable and never allow the players to go past it. Oftentimes, players keep over the line. Coaches know it, but that player is very valuable, and the coaches overlook it. That creates issues in the locker room amongst the rest of the players. If that player can step over the line, why can't I? And before you know it, there's no line left. That's a problem for every team, isn't it?
Oh, hands down, no question. And I think, players will only go as far as the coach will allow them to go. And going back to what we just spoke about, that's where the structure comes into place. We understand at this, at the college level, the junior level, the midget major, even high school level, kids are going to color outside the lines on occasion. But how we act and react to those situations and corral that situation ultimately can give that player better trajectory and the coach better trajectories, as well. So you're right. And I think, again, that comes down to coaches feel the need to maybe give that latitude and give that kind of free reign because maybe that player is a better player. The problem is it's detrimental long term to the structure of your team. It creates so much problems in the locker room. And if you don't hold the best player to the same set of standards as your not best player, these kids are smart. They see it. They'll run you over. They'll consistently push the envelope, and you'll be chasing your tail all season as a coach. So, and my best unsolicited advice for coaches is they're all treated exactly the same, and put some structure in place because it's going to be better for you long term as a coach, and it's also going to be better for these players that their expectations are at a high level from the coaching staff.
In most cases, when teams have discipline problems, the issue comes down to the coach. What is that coach trying to accomplish? Does he understand these players are not his friends and that the parents have turned over the reins of accountability to the coach? The sad part is that a lot of coaches struggle with that responsibility and also enable behavior that leads to serious discipline problems. It's not that the coaches are bad people, and in most cases, they generally want what's best for the players. We've seen this. We've seen really good coaches on the ice completely lose track and lose control of the room. And when that happens, all hell breaks loose. And literally, wasn't too long ago, a bright young coach from Minnesota was coaching out in Wyoming, had a rock star hockey team, brought in a lot of 19 and 20-year-olds, and they dominated that division out there. But he lost control of the room, complete control. And it ended up costing that coach his career. I don't know where that coach is now, and that's been 2 or 3 years ago. The team tanked. They were one of the strongest teams in the league, wins and loss-wise. They tanked. They were gone. They're still playing hockey now, but they're just a mere shadow of themselves, what they were a couple of years ago. And that comes down to one thing, discipline. They lost control, and they eventually lost everything.
Yeah, and I know who you're referring to, and sometimes prosperity is even tough for coaches, and sometimes you feel as a coach maybe you shouldn't pull the reins back and maybe keep things status quo, if you will, and that comes down to experience. It really does. It comes down to some values as well as some ethical positioning for us as coaches. But you can't let the inmates run the asylum. You've got to make sure that you have complete control. And, I think the one thing that when I was coaching, a lot of times when you're in a community, what people don't understand is what those players do there will always stay there. And that means good or bad. And I know when I was coaching in Fresno, that was a tough market. We had inherited a professional market of 60 years. The expectations from fans and sponsors and ticket holders was different, because they've been working with, or spending time with professional athletes, and our junior players were not that. And it was a constant struggle for us to make sure that these young men understood that in this community, even though they were treated like professional athletes, they were still young men. And that was kind of our message was, what you guys do here will always stay here. And you and I have talked about it. I still work with Fresno on occasion to help them out. I know the new ownership, but sometimes coaches get caught up in that type of deal too. And that coach in Wyoming, I mean, they were, 31-1 at one point, or 35-1, and he was on an all-time high. And being a young coach and first-time head coach, that success sometimes you feel as if why rock the boat when it's working. So it's unfortunate, but it happens. You have to, as a coach, you have to have strong convictions in what you think is right. You have to always do what's right, and no matter how hard it is.
I think it also comes down to leadership, not within the room. A lot of times, this is the first time a player gets away from home. He's graduated from high school. This is his first opportunity in his life to really focus on hockey. He gets to his junior team, and there's 19 and 20-year-olds with alter. They're there. They're 19 and 20 and playing on that team. They're not in college yet, and they're the influence, right? So I think if these players focus on letting that first year away from home, out of school, your first opportunity to really focus on the hockey, the sky's the limit what a player can accomplish. But if you have 2 or 3 donkeys in the room, disturbing that development and sending that player down the wrong path, and then it could be catastrophic consequences, not only for the team, but for that individual player's career. We see that over and over again. There's so many kids are just so close to being outstanding hockey players, but they let the other side of the game get in the way of their development. And when that happens, it's sad, because unfulfilled potential is probably the nastiest word in junior hockey. We see it every day.
Yeah, there's no question, Steve. Leadership starts at the top. And if your ownership and your coaches and your GM aren't, pulling the rope in the same direction, and everybody's on the same page, you're going to have fractures. But I think if the goals in mind are to get to college, to get to, an NHL draft status, whatever, you don't find a lot of this stuff at a higher level. USHL, North American League, you don't find a lot of problems because there's something at stake, right? And I think where you find, in just my experience, where you find is a lot of times at the tier 3 level, where there's, pay to play model, and, maybe not everybody on the program is paying the same freight. You're in a small community where, wins and losses are more important than player advancement. A multiple of things. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I'm just saying that's where sometimes you see a lot of it. But when you start dealing with the higher level teams and the higher level programs, where there's millions of dollars at stake from ownerships, that gets passed down to the coaches, that gets passed down to the players, and everybody's got a goal in mind. They want something out of it. And I think it gets a little cloudy and muddy at times, but yeah, leadership starts at the top.
We talk to kids all the time about their first year of junior hockey. We have a lot of kids coming out of 16U and 18U and making a decision. Do I stick in AAA or do I go to junior? The difference between AAA and junior, this is especially true in the Midwestern United States, Central Canada, all the way to the West Coast, is that the junior team is generally the entertainment of the community, especially in Canada, where it's like living in a fishbowl. You don't go there and be promiscuous. If you got to get a girlfriend, you get one. If it doesn't work out with that girl, you're done for the year, right? So you just don't be promiscuous. You just don't be an idiot in the town, because you are not just you. You are now the team. You're representing a brand, and your behavior as a player can have a negative influence on the financial viability of that team. That's certainly the case in Canada. In Fresno, I think things were a little bit different with Fresno State in town, but you guys were the only event in town that allowed beer sales. So, of course, you had a different fan set than what was going on at Fresno State. I remember the old Fresno Falcon days. Those fans were awesome. I remember the Hoff Brawl. Your kids really couldn't go into the Hoff Brawl. Well, not legally, but the old days, it was drinking with the team was part of the fan experience. And with junior hockey, that does happen in some communities. It's not advisable, but it's still going on. The structure of pro hockey and junior hockey is different. In junior hockey, we want to develop these young boys into becoming gentlemen and being young men. You were fantastic at doing that, Eric. And despite all these things, when it comes to coaches around that I've been around my whole career, you're one of the guys that I have the most respect for, because you recognize those necessities as part of the game, and your career really has shown that.
I appreciate that, Steven. I appreciate the kind words. At